Good evening. My name is Alexander Hagan. Tonight, I'd like to speak to you about Bolivia. I addressed you a week ago, right after the coup went off, and I want to bring an update to people about what's going on as of today, the 16th of November. Incredibly, since I last addressed you, the 16 audio tapes that were released detailing the coup conspiracy that has been planned for years in some aspects, months in others, and weeks in others. This tape series has not yet bubbled up into the mainstream media. It's on Telesur, which is a leftist television and news agency, mainly associated with Venezuela, but not solely Venezuela. It's been hosted by the Cuban news agency. It's been hosted on a lot of alternative media, but the hard work of creating transcripts of all 16 audio tapes and verifying and confirming the identities where they are known, such as certain generals and certain opposition leaders, by comparing the audio from the tapes to the audio of the people's voices. I haven't seen it yet, but we can say that what the tapes show, which were released well before the coup and prior to the worst attacks, has been exactly what we have seen unfold on the ground, this campaign of terror and intimidation of socialists. The Bolivian Right, which has been revealed to even have Nazi-type organizations operating within it, cannot win power constitutionally, nor can it win at the ballot box without first purging the socialists, terrorizing them into being afraid to show up. It's pretty unbelievable. This is old school stuff, and I don't think that the Bolivia of today will accept it, but we'll find out. Depends on how it all plays out. They intend, the right, the coup plotters, intend to begin arresting socialists they deem disruptive to their illegal, unconstitutional rule. Now, I've avoided any speculation in this. This is all double referenceable empirical fact as much as we can obtain it. There's no question that they themselves declared today they're going to start arresting people for subversion. Okay, so what has transpired in the last week, and not in any particular order? A few detachments of soldiers and police have been seen on video showing sympathy and support for the left in Bolivia, the Morales supporters, however you want to describe this reluctance to be seen as the enemies of the indigenous people. And the main way this has been seen is by flying the indigenous flag, but also there was one march going to La Paz, where supposedly the military were escorting them in a friendly fashion. And there are even, of course, opponents of Morales who are even more opposed to the illegitimate and terrifying way power was seized and has since been wielded. Thousands have been detained. In South America, mass arrests like this usually involve torture, rape, beatings, and disappearance, i.e., murder or execution. We can only hope that this type of violence is at least contained. Hundreds have been wounded, with over 100 protesters being shot with bullets. Not protest bullets, but live rounds, not rubber coated, from helicopter in some cases, as well as from police and soldiers on the ground, infantry, and operating from armored vehicles. The worst was the Cochabamba massacre, where 12 or more protesters were killed, shot dead, and another 80 or so were injured with bullet wounds, with hundreds likely injured trying to escape the scene. Agnes declared herself president unconstitutionally and has been exposed as a religious Christian fanatic who finds indigenous people to be essentially subhuman, and has accused them of being engaged in satanic rites and asked that they not be in the cities but be only in the countryside, which is a very serious thing to say, because in Bolivia, up until recently, indigenous people were prevented from entering the cities. There was terrible discrimination. She's basically calling for Jim Crow in Bolivia style. Camacho is little better than the leader of a bunch of skinhead brown shirts with a similar white nationalist fanatical Christian ideology. Of course, Jesus would scarcely recognize what they practice, oppression of the poor and racism. After initially being violently blocked from entering Congress, the Socialist Party and others did finally manage to get into their respective legislative chambers, get enough people to have a quorum, and elected socialist leaders to both chambers as the heads. So any attempt to create a succession now would have to flow back to the people that held the majority seats. As I told you in the last, about 2/3 of the seats in the Bolivian parliament are controlled by the party of Evo Morales, the MAS party. So they also declined to accept Morales' resignation. So constitutionally, Evo Morales is the president of Bolivia and will be till January. Video has emerged of enormous mobilizations all over the country. If these continue, it will be hard for these rightists to maintain control of the police and military, who will grow nervous at their being supported by a smaller and smaller percentage of the population. No one wants to be hated by their countrymen. Of course, we had all this happen in Chile and in all of these countries, but is 2019 different from 1973? And I would say it is. The U.S., the United Kingdom, to their shame, and Brazil have recognized the coup government, but Argentina and Uruguay have not, along with, of course, the remaining socialist bloc of Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and leftist Mexico under Andrés Manuel López Obrador, all of them being vocal in their opposition to what we can call the military junta led by Áñez. The United Nations has sent an envoy who is considered a respectable and honest broker, and we shall see. The way the right will seize power is through a campaign of intimidation against leftists. This is an old game they know how to play, to be brutal to people that are socialist or communist. After all, they killed Che Guevara in Bolivia in 1967, roughly. They have declared they will arrest Morales Party congresspeople who show too much resistance to their campaign of terror and their illegitimate rule. They have announced they will begin jailing MAS officials, that is socialists, imminently for something like subversion. Another fact that came out since our last talk, Morales was almost sold out and betrayed. His retinue were offered $50,000 to hand him over to the rightists. But luckily, he found out about this and no one did sell him out. Also, when he was attempting to fly to Mexico, the Ecuadorian government, the Coup leaders, the Peruvian government, all at various times withdrew permission to fly over their airspace. It was only with great difficulty that they got Brazil to agree to do it. And it sounds like the Mexican and Brazilian foreign ministers might have had some personal connection that was stronger than Bolsonaro and Morales, who hate each other. Many, many houses of MAS supporters and particular leaders have been attacked and firebombed. The brother of Evo Morales was paraded naked to humiliate him and to humiliate and terrorize the socialists. As I predicted, Áñez, whose coup leaders originally talked of elections in 30 days, then, as of yesterday, they talked about mid to late January. Now, today, they are saying 3 months. Now we're talking February, and this is what I predicted. Their goal first is to pacify Bolivia. That is, conduct a terror purge on the MAS party and any who stand in their way to white supremacist religious fanatical rule. It is truly cowboys versus Indians. That is, the descendants of conquistadors and Europeans savagely repressing indigenous and lower-class mestizo peoples. I think they will have a very hard time holding power. With such international disgust at this coup, although the international outcry has not yet developed adequately, which is why I'm bothering to make this recording. And having faces like Áñez and Camacho, terrifying white supremacist fanatic bigots, as the face of this coup, will horrify the majority of Bolivians. So I don't see that they'll be able to hold power. But it does depend on what the international community does and what the MAS supporters and the indigenous people of Bolivia who don't want this right-wing coup government in. Part of this delay in holding elections is to plunder the country and reshape its foreign policy. armored cars rolled up to the mint or wherever they keep their money there and took it all and rolled off to who knows where. This happened in Libya, obviously. What will happen to the gold reserves as in Libya? 700 Cuban doctors have been expelled. Journalists are being threatened. Venezuelans are being expelled. If ever the country cuts off telecommunications, there will be less foreign witnesses to describe this repression. Only the corporate media will be allowed in, and then they will be expected to drive support for coupists government. Part of this dismantlement, I'm live. Part of this dismantlement of the institution is to withdraw Bolivia from Al-Basur, the Bolivarian alliance. They are reshaping the military and the foreign policy with no mandate and delaying elections until they have reshaped the terrain to believe they could win in a highly unfree election, as they will simply arrest everyone trying to run for office that polls higher than they do. Why wouldn't this work? It will depend on whether divisions begin to emerge inside the coupists machinery, the resistance of legislators, administrators, police, and military, the development of village-level self-defense units, which is happening. At the same time, there should be a rising protest from the international community, especially, as I mentioned, with Camacho and Áñez, such horrifying figureheads of this coup government. Also, their tone-deaf installation of an all-white cabinet, the purge and replacement of the entire officer corps, presumably with a largely white military head. So the military that did betray Morales have been dismissed, and loyalists to these fascists have been brought in place. The dawning awareness in the international community that the Organization of American State report, which drew into question this election, essentially created the coup conditions through a false narrative that the elections were problematic. CEPR has done a report debunking the OAS report and criticizing the OAS for once again facilitating coups by right-wing oligarchs and fanatics over genuinely working-class aligned leaders. This happened in Haiti in particular, but other places as well, when Aristide, who was a man of the people, was forced out of Haiti with OAS pressure. And now we see it with Morales in Bolivia. And so the OAS is seen more and more as a handmaiden for colonial, neo-colonial, neoliberal, imperialist policies. The combination of internal resistance, trying to keep the army and police a kingmaker that could potentially fall to either side, especially lower-ranking members joining the resistance to the coup. This, combined with international condemnation, will create a collapse of the coup government. But peace is not possible as long as people are being terrorized for their political views. Bolivia is potentially a rich country, and I do not think that the people of Bolivia will prefer their resources managed by types like Camacho and Áñez, as opposed to the relatively wise stewardship their resources were managed under MAS, the movement of socialism. As some person remarked from Bolivia, he did not rob the country. My name is Alexander Hagen. Good night and good luck.